Hello, I'm Lyman, and I'm here with my good friend Marcel, and together we are Jazz and Grass. Welcome to our podcast, Jazz and Grass, and other stuff too. The very first episode. Basically, today we're just going to talk about who we are and why you should care about that.
Yeah, because I certainly don't care at all about us.
I have very little, sense of self-worth. But you should value us. I mean,
yeah, right. Yeah, if you like the licks, why wouldn't you like just us talking into microphones? This is a logical next step. So yeah, we thought we'd talk about just kind of how we started out here and what our upbringings were like, what kind of music we played when we were young. I don't know. Lyman, you want to go first? You want me to go first?
Yeah. I had a very, very interesting, eclectic musical upbringing. My father was a semi-professional musician, and he played primarily reggae. He was a reggae guitar player, specializing in soca music. So when I was a small child, I was fed a steady diet of reggae, as well as my dad was born in the 50s, so he's heard a lot of music and seen a lot of changes go through music in general. So I heard a lot of classical when I was a kid, a lot of jazz. I have very vivid memories of listening to this show called Musical Star Streams. It was like ambient electronic music.
When was
it's
that?
Just this was like it had to be like 96, 97.
Okay.
Like I was just a kid. It was like just ambient electronic music, soundscapes and stuff like that. And yeah, I didn't really start playing music until I was like 11 or so. I didn't even really care about music at all. Like I was just exposed to a lot of it.
What were you playing then?
When I was 11?
Yeah.
My dad said, you must try an instrument. You have the opportunity. You must play one. If you don't like it, you can quit after a year. So I decided, well, nobody's going to play the viola. I've never even heard of what that is. So I'll play that. And I'm for sure not going to like it.
Which was a good choice.
Lo and behold.
All those hipster girls, they play the viola. That's what you were in it for. Your 8-year-old self was like, man, I got to meet some women.
And I realized, like, because of all the music, like, I had been exposed to, like, probably during my mother's pregnancy and throughout all my childhood, like, I had an aptitude for being able to hear simple melodies and figure them out relatively quickly. So that was my advantage. Like, the only advantage I've ever had in music was I could figure out melodies before all the other 11-year-olds could.
Yeah, nice. Did you do you think that gave you any struggles when you were learning though? Like, did you find yourself like reading less music and figuring out more music?
Yeah, I've never been too great of a reader. I mean, I can get through a chart. I'm a terrible sight reader. But thankfully, when I made the jump to bass when I was 14, all I had to read pretty much was quarter notes.
Yeah, and orchestra, so you're in the key of like G or D or A.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Well, most people with great ears, I mean, I'm just generally don't have to be great readers. It's normally not what they follow. And you went into improvisational genres anyway, so Not that you don't have to look at charts, but you're more interpreting charts, not reading charts, right? There's a difference there.
And it's something like I try to put in a little work on every now and then. Like I would like to be a better reader at some point. What about you? How about you share part of your story up until you started actually playing music, just like what you were raised on?
Yeah, totally. So my dad was a jazz drummer, and he played throughout his high school years, and he sold his drum set to help pay for his first car. And yeah, he had a lot of really great experiences. But when I came into the picture, you know, when when my mom and him had me, they didn't have a drum set anymore. And I think the only time I ever heard him play drums was like driving a car, and like, you know, like the steering wheel was the snare drum. You got a right cymbal and like the dashboard. And like, I mean, you already got pedals. It's a car, you know, you're good to go. But yeah, sometime, I actually think it was when I was in second or third grade. I remember because we had just moved. My dad bought he bought a drum set and started taking lessons again. And I had the opportunity to kind of start learning from him and how to hold the sticks and like my first basic rhythms. And of course, that the dreaded stick control book, and the first page is full of a bunch of different exercises for sticking. And I did all of those a million times. So yeah, that was my first instrument, and I started taking with my father's teacher, who's a guy named Mel Zelnick, who played with a bunch of famous people. He was the drummer for Benny Goodman for a long time, and yeah, he kind of had a really long, storied career. He did a lot of stuff with different jazz musicians, and you can find some of it online on YouTube if you search Mel Zelnick. But he ended up moving to the West Coast, and he had a music store, and then he ended up moving to Arizona, which is where I met him. And so I would have been, how old would I have been? You know, I would have been, you know, maybe 12 years old, and he was like in his 80s. So it was really cool to meet him. We would have to drive like through the desert for an extended length of time to get to his house, which was literally in the middle of nowhere. Like, you want to talk middle of nowhere. Mel's house was in the middle of nowhere. You had to have 4-wheel drive, and like none of the roads were paved. It was so easy to get lost. And it was just a wonderful experience. His house was also very much like the Weasley's house from Harry Potter or something. Like, it was all
really.
They had added onto it so many times that it had to be held together by magic. Anyway, for fans of my YouTube videos, my cat just walked in the door. So if you heard my door creak, that's the familiar sound. Oh, there it is. Hey, what's up, Sush? Anyway, sorry about the cat interruption there. But yeah, that's about where I started playing music. So I wasn't even playing the right instrument. I played a lot of wrong instruments, you might say, but drums was my first. What happened when you started playing music? You switched over to bass, and
the bass wasn't actually my first switch. I switched to violin like a year after playing the viola, just because I don't know, I wanted the spotlight or something.
Yeah, you seem like a spotlight kind of guy.
Violins had cooler melodies to play. I mean, not that much cooler at the age of 11, and where everybody's pretty much playing the same note. But a year after that, I started playing a couple songs. A concert on the upright bass, all the while I was playing guitar as well, just learning any rock song I could get my hands on. Like,
yeah, totally.
I remember a couple vividly, like Smells Like Teen Spirit, Nirvana, of course, and the more obscure Today Is In My Way by MXPX.
So you justified the switch from violin to bass because they're tuned the same way, just reversed?
I pretty much just wanted to play anything I could get my hands on. Like,
Yeah, you didn't care. You weren't like, all right, well the tuning's similar. This is why I'll switch. You were like, just give me something else.
yeah, give me a couple cans. Like my brother says, anything is a noisemaker if you try hard enough.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I just wanted to play like literally anything I could get my hands on. But when I was in 8th grade, I wasn't in orchestra. I stopped being in orchestra. I pretty much just played guitar all the time. It wasn't until I got to high school where I thought maybe I should, take up school music again. And so I joined the orchestra. And one of my good buddies who played bassoon in band asked me if I played bass and if I could fill in for the high school jazz band because they needed a bass player and it had been a couple months of classes and nobody had stepped up to play the bass in the jazz band. So I thought, yeah, I played it a little bit before. Maybe I could figure it out. I don't know. And I did my best to try to figure it out.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so I started after I started playing drums, I did a bunch of stuff and I tried to start bands with my friends and everything as you do. Nothing really took off. Nothing was very successful or anything, but I was in my first real band in 8th grade, and it was a mother who played guitar and her daughter who sang, and I played drums for them. And it was really cool. We did some gigging around town, and they were much older than me. The daughter was, I think, in the later years of high school, and the mother was actually a counselor at my school who worked with any kids that were hard of hearing, and that's how I met her because I was in their program there. So I ended up playing with them for a long time, and then my family moved to Bellingham. I didn't have any friends, and I kind of went through what you went through, where I was like, man, just give me everything. Like, let me just try to play whatever I possibly can. Mm-hmm. And I started playing a lot more guitar. I started playing a lot of bass. I started playing piano, and I was playing drums. And that's also when I started recording stuff. And I was taking my computer, we had an extra bedroom, into the extra bedroom. And I was like trying to figure out how you could plug things into it and like how you can make programs to recognize like things from different inputs, and then like how you connect a mixer to that, and then like what cables go to what things, and all of that sort of learning experience that everyone goes through. That was, awesome. And by the time I met you, was actually, during my orchestra time, one of the times we met each other. But I had actually just taken up upright bass because I wanted to get out of this really hard science class. And and I knew that beginning orchestra was at the same period. In this science class I didn't even want to take. My counselor was like, oh yeah, you got to take this. And I was an idiot. So I was like, oh yeah, I'll do it. And so when I wanted to quit, I was like, well, beginning orchestra is at the same period, so I'll just sign up for that. And I told the teacher that I had like held an upright bass or something previously, which was a total fabrication. And she was like, all right, wonderful. Like, go get one. And I go into the instrument closet and I'm all alone in there. And there's, several upright basses. I have no way of discerning which ones are quality or bad. I have no idea. I also don't even know how to handle one. And I'm like, all right, let me just grab this thing. And, walked out into the room and joined the class. And I even remember very specifically turning to the kid next to me and being like, is this a G note? And him saying no. And like, that was the downbeat of the first song I ever played in orchestra. It's like this kid being like, no, that's not a G. And then like the song starting. It was wonderful.
That's such a classic story. Like, is this the right note? Nope. Down.
Yeah, that was really something. So that was one of the times that we met because they combined the advanced orchestra. Was it? No, it was the chamber orchestras, right?
Yeah, all of the chamber orchestras for the city, I think, like an all city concert for some dessert benefit
Oh
thing.
yeah. I remember it now. Yeah, it was in the Bellingham High School. Yeah. Um, there was three bass players from, I guess, the three different chamber orchestras, or was
Were
there
there
four?
3 or 4?
I only remember three of them. If there was a fourth person, I don't remember who that is. But anyway, one of the people was you, one of the people was me, and one of the other people was that girl that played bass in town for a long time, right? Does she still?
I don't know what happened to her.
Well, I guess we can say her name. I mean, it's not like it's any secret. Is it a secret?
Hi, Amelia. Are you
Yeah.
are you listening?
But anyway, I remember I had only been playing bass for a couple months because, I mean, that was just recently that I'd gotten out of that science class. And I remember being, in the back of the room with you guys. Both of you know how to play the bass. I am trying my hardest to fake playing the bass. And I remember both of your bows were in sync, going like back and forth. And mine was going the opposite direction. That very quintessential orchestra way of telling, like, hey, that's the guy who doesn't know what he's doing. It was great. Like, I was just like trying to read the notes. My like slurs were in the wrong places and stuff. I was just like trying to get it out however I could. That was wonderful.
Well, secret time. Any chance that my bowings were, synced up with hers? Complete accident. I am terrible with the bow.
That's good to know. That makes me feel a lot better. She was good with the bow, though, right?
Yeah.
She was the only one maybe that knew what she was doing.
My left hand was okay, but like when it came to the right hand, I was guessing most of the time.
So more on how we met, right? The first time we had crossed paths was actually before orchestra, right?
Yeah.
In our high school years, we both had our own bands, yeah?
One of the only times, one of 2 bands pretty much that I've ever sang in. I was in a band called Sideways Gravity, and I was singing and playing guitar, and we played ska music. We had
Hey, shout out to all you Sideways Gravity fans out there still listening.
every couple years, I think, man, I should just bring that band back somehow. And I keep adding things to the name. The first time it became The Legend of Sideways Gravity. And then The Legend of the Awesome Sideways Gravity. And
I think it should just be your it should be like your backing band name. So it's always like the Lyman Lipke Experience featuring Sideways Gravity.
yeah, that's a good idea.
Anyway, so one time we played a show at a now defunct venue called Fantasia. Fantasia or Fantasias?
I think it was Fantasia Coffee House.
Yeah, it was a coffee house because we were young. We were in high school. But my band was called Vintage Rhymes and Valentines. Shout out to all you VRV fans out there. I know there's literally dozens of you. But yeah, that was a great show. That was a weird show. We talked about this recently, actually. But there was some of the opening acts were really, really strange. You remember that guy had like an amp strapped to his back or something, and he had his mic plugged into it, and he like led the crowd around marching. Point is, we played a really quality show, is what I'm trying to tell the listeners. Like this was real official, high level stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But that was funny. I mean, literally, both of us were playing things that are kind of couldn't be farther from what we ended up doing. You were playing in a ska band, and I was playing in like a pop rock band, I guess you would call it.
Yeah. I think that just goes back to, it takes a long time to find yourself musically. And
that's very true.
I mean, I'm still trying to find myself musically, man.
Yeah, I don't think that's something you ever really want to feel too comfortable in, right?
Yeah.
So how did we reconnect? Even this whole episode, by the way, is basically just our love story. That's think about it that way, and you'll be with us a lot longer, I think. How did we meet again after that? Because every time we met, we just kind of crossed paths. We knew each other's names, but we weren't friends or anything. I mean, we were just like acquaintances, right?
Yeah.
I didn't have your phone number. I wasn't like calling you up to hang out.
We talked about this recently. There was I remember vividly meeting you at like this Halloween party or something.
Oh, yeah.
It may have not been a Halloween party. It was a couple days before Halloween.
I admittedly don't remember this very well, which, as the story is told, it may become clear as to why I don't remember it so well.
Well, something I'm relatively open about. I'm a recovering alcoholic, so I was very inebriated that night. But I remember the guy in the cowboy hat and talking to him about playing music. And
that's kind of a theme for me, is that every Halloween I only dress up as a cowboy. So it makes it especially hard, because if Lyman's like, "Hey, you were dressed as a cowboy," that means nothing to me. That's every Halloween ever. But yes, I had been drinking heavily as well, and for some reason I think I remember hanging out like on the outside of the building with you. Like maybe we were hanging out in like the smokers area or something.
Yeah, it wasn't inside the house. It was outside.
Yeah,
I remember it not being that cold.
I think we both kind of remember it, but I don't think you could say what we talked about or anything else.
I think the subject was general music. I think that was it.
But yeah, anyway, after that, I kind of finally got in a place where I was, I had moved out of my parents' house, and I had finally gotten to the place where I was actually playing bluegrass music, which is still what I do to this day. And I was discovering bluegrass music. I was definitely like getting into like some country and stuff, but I wasn't sure like exactly where it was going to go. And I think that's the next time we probably talked, because somehow I called you up and I was like, "Hey, do you want to be part of this project called David's Drinking Band? Do you want to play upright bass for it?" And I don't remember how that conversation happened at all. Do you remember how that conversation happened?
It was before that. You called me up to do a musical called Rent.
Oh yeah. Oh man. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. So we did a big production of Rent at the local university, and I was playing drums again. What was I doing?
Yeah.
Man?
I don't know if anybody who's listening has ever done a musical production. You do a lot of rehearsals. So that kind of gave Marcel and I some time to, get to know each other a little better and like bond and stuff like that.
Yeah,
but
totally.
Like you said, this is a bromance for the ages.
There's so much hanging out that goes into any kind of production like that you can't help becoming friends with the entire cast. And then as soon as the show's over, you have this like sinking feeling of like, oh man, I won't get to hang out with these like 50 people in the same room at the same time again. It's really weird.
Yeah. Like I don't think I've talked to anybody who did that production besides you.
Yeah, it's weird.
But
Side note, there was a specific performance that we had to do, and Lyman couldn't make it. Oh, it was a preview is what it was. It was a preview for so we play the whole show, and Lyman couldn't make it. So they hired me to play bass for Lyman, and then they hired someone to sit in on drums for me. And that was like the weirdest thing I've ever had to do, because I've done a lot of plays and productions, but that was the weirdest thing I ever had to do. It's like you've already learned this entire musical on drums. Now for one show or two shows, whatever it was, you have to play it like on bass while someone else like sight reads your part on drums. It was a surreal experience.
I cannot believe I got away with that. And again, that's like a testament to, your musicianship. Like, and that's why I want to do something like this and just talk to you and pick your brain. And, maybe we might come up with some new ideas, new things.
Or get married.
That's what I'm hoping for. That's the end goal.
Uh, I think you're already taken, bud. I think I'm already taken too. Anyway, yeah. So after that, we met in David's drinking band, which was basically just a bluegrass band that I ran, and you're also the one who introduced me to Nick Sokol, who's a wonderful mandolin player and also a wonderful saxophone player, which is how you knew him, yeah.
Yeah, I knew him as a saxophone player, and he told me he played mandolin. And once we started playing bluegrass together, you and I figured, oh, why not give this guy a call?
And it turns out he's like great. He was like one of the best in town. He still is one of the best in that town.
Absolutely fabulous musician.
Yeah.
Shout out to Nick if you're listening.
So yeah, then we played a bunch of shows with David's drinking band. You would have been with that band for a couple of years, yeah.
I feel like a year and a half, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe 6 months. I don't know.
We got in a bunch of stupid fights, and you ended up leaving that project.
Yeah, I was drinking a lot. I mean, that was the name of the band, David's
Yeah, I
Drinking
think
Band.
we were all drinking a lot. I don't think that helped the situation in any way. But we ended up having someone else in the band play some bass, but it was never the same in regards to bass because there were very few people that could have filled your shoes in terms of like taking bass solos and stuff like that, especially in a bluegrass band on an upright bass. It was sort of compound the difficulty of how you would possibly do that.
Yeah, I still don't feel like I can, take a capable bluegrass solo.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember this, but you worked out the. I guess you're a jazz musician. You would call it the head. You worked out an A part to a fiddle tune called Blackberry Blossom, and you were able to play it on upright bass. But it was super cool. I mean, it's a really here. I'll play it on my guitar real quick. It's a really kind of like involved melody. Oh, sounds like this. Right?
Jazz.
Jazz. You figured that out on bass, and it's funny. I played it kind of slow, but normally when it's played, it's right. It kind of cooks along, and I remember you were able to hang on that, and it was just shocking. It was like, what? How are you doing that on the upright bass?
I do remember that. I remember feeling very, very sloppy with it. Probably because I was, getting very, very sloppy.
Man.
But that's
Yeah.
that's something I should look at again, like learning that melody.
Yeah, it was cool. I think you had to get it done with a lot of hammer-ons and pull-offs, but I mean, that's the only way you could possibly do it.
Unless you're like, Niels Henning Ostred Pedersen with the 3-finger upright bass technique.
Are these other men you don't want me to know about?
That dude with 4 names is one guy. He's one guy.
Oh man, sounds like he can play the bass for 2 men, 2 normal-sized men.
Oh, he can. Good. I want to talk a little bit more about like just my general musical upbringing, like what I've done for the last 4 years or so.
Oh yeah, for sure. Get into the recent stuff.
I ended up joining a funk and soul band called Baby Cakes.
Which are great.
Was some fabulous musicians. And like I essentially had made the jump from bluegrass, and I was also in like what would you call the Von Vettas? Like I would almost call it classic rock, new classic rock.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So I was making
another great band too, though. Great musicians in that one too.
So I was making the jump from like bluegrass and classic rock to type of music I always really enjoyed, just funk and soul. And while I was doing that, I was getting really into the new EDM music. Like the 2 biggest, I guess, subgenres I guess you'd call them, that I was into were trap and future bass. And that actually inspired me like to actually learn how to produce and record music. I got a copy of FL Studio and started trying to make trap beats. And from there, like I started recording actual instruments into FL Studio, and just started making actual instrumental music with real instruments in a program that's primarily known best for its ease of use for electronic stuff.
You gotta come up with a better genre name there, buddy. You gotta do like glitch, post EDM, trance bass, drum and bass. I don't know, man. Just think of some more things you can pop in there.
Deep groove finger bass.
Oh man, not that. I think there's a lot of other connotations that could go with that genre name.
But yeah, that kind of led me to where I am today. I got real back into my roots with jazz, taking jazz guitar more seriously. I put out two tracks every week, kind of a hybrid of jazz and lo-fi hip hop. And that's something like I've kind of wanted to talk about like a little bit, like why I'm actually doing that. There's a few reasons. It does feel like, I'm just putting stuff out for no reason, but like there's actually a couple things that I'm working on consistently with this project. And you can find that on my SoundCloud. I'll have a link to it. One, I want to get my jazz chord melody chops up better than they are now. And that was one thing I never really did a lot of, playing chord melodies. So what this gives me is like an opportunity to take a small 4-bar chunk of some sort of melody or line that I come up with or am inspired by, and really just nail a nice way of playing that. And two, I take a little solo over a bunch of those changes. So I'm working on, my improvising ability. Three, I'm just cutting my production chops, like just really working on being able to produce something quickly. And four, probably the biggest one for me, just adhering to a schedule and just continue to do it. Schedules have always been hard for me. Maybe that's why I, have such a desire to be a musician, because you can be a little bit looser with your schedule if you want to be.
I think those last two are really cool things, though. I mean, I think they're really important things for most musicians. You need to be able to like produce, produce or perform, reliably, which means, having some kind of like skill, with being able to produce things and having them always be quality is huge, And it's something that I struggled with on YouTube a lot when I started out, or, recording anything. I struggled with a lot where you would, like record a guitar and then be like, oh, I don't like that. Let me just re-record it. And it sounds completely different. And you're like, all right, well, how did I record it the first time? And you have no idea. You don't have the skill set yet to like, produce things regularly and have them all be of the same quality. And then sticking to a schedule is huge too. I mean, and also very difficult. It's, when you're doing anything creative, it's really tempting to just be like, man, I'll create when I'm feeling like creative, or I'll create when that specific moment strikes, or like, any of that. I think it's kind of BS, but it's, there's so much good that can come of just like forcing yourself to produce and forcing yourself to have to, get these things done. And you're like getting yourself into a creative mindset, regularly. And you'll probably be more creative more often once your body is like accustomed to having to do this all the time.
Absolutely. Like, I feel like I'm trying to hack creativity. And I'll get to this a little bit on the next, one of the next segments. Just like learning a new voicing, like a new voicing for a chord, and then trying to build something around that. That's one technique I've used to sort of pump out as many tracks as I have been pumping out.
It's kind of like a
just finding
maybe like a paint yourself into a corner kind of situation. You like purposefully put up walls so that way like you have to think your way out of it, and then as soon as you have a solution, you like take away the walls so you can like explore what's around. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Like limitations breed creativity.
Oh, yeah.
I think, and I'm sure a lot of people would agree with that. So I try to put certain limits on myself when I'm trying to just make something.
Yeah, I think there's there's a couple sides to that coin with limitations and creativity. A lot of times people will, especially beginning players, will have too many limitations on themselves, and they won't give themselves a chance to think creatively out of a situation. For instance, if you give someone, a guitar and you teach them, you just teach them, like your basic pentatonic scale, like what every guitar player, hears, and, you have them run through changes, making things up. A lot of times they put more limitations than necessary on themselves. They'll think like, all right, well, if I'm on a string, I have to play both of the notes I have on that string. When in reality, you could pass the string and just play one note, or you could skip a string entirely, or you could skip two strings. There's like lots of things you can do, but a lot of times people will put even more limitations than they think they're putting on themselves. And I notice that a lot when I start teaching people how to improvise in the beginning. And, I put them in a situation like that where there's an approach, whether it be a scale or an arpeggio or whatever. And then, there's the situation of it's over this chord, over that chord or whatever. And when they go to like try to use the approach, a lot of times they're putting these extra limitations on themselves and they're not actually thinking outside of the pentatonic box, if you will.
There's a real good video out there of Scott Henderson talking about the pentatonic scale, and he does some real cool stuff. I'd encourage all of you to check out Scott Henderson. He played in Chick Corea's band for a little bit, kind of fusion blues rock player.
Totally.
But yeah, is there anything that you want to talk about from David's drinking band till now that shaped who you are as a player?
Yeah, good point. So everyone in David's drinking band kind of went there in different directions. Of course, Lyman ended up moving to Arizona, and we were all in Washington State. Our other singer we had in the band, Robin, she ended up moving to Colorado. Nick, our mandolin player, he had a couple kids and he's living kind of outside of town, and that made a lot of gigs really tough. And I know that everyone kind of wanted to keep the project going and keep playing gigs when there was time, but that ended up not being the case. I ended up moving on and trying to find a bunch of other ways that I can play, which is really tough because I started that band and I really loved that band, but I realized that it was that there was no more time for it to happen. So I started just doing the sideman thing, which I never thought that, I didn't initially think that I would have much interest in that, but I ended up loving. I loved the sideman thing, and I got to play with a bunch of great bands. High Mountain String Band, Broken Bow String Band, Queen's Bluegrass were all bands that I just, started out just playing on the side and just, being the guy who would like step forward and take the cool guitar break. And then I was like gone again. And then when it was time to pack up, I would coil up my guitar cord and I would like be out of there. It's fun. It's nice. I don't have to go into like any rehearsals. I don't have to do anything. We're all playing standard bluegrass stuff. I can show up and I can go. And eventually I kind of got tired of that in that, as you do, you get tired of it. And I started a duo with my friend Nakos, who's a killer dobro player. And it's just really, really just fast bluegrass. It's not anything progressive. We only do, traditional tracks. So it's all from the standard repertoire, but they're definitely infused with some crazy other stuff. As well as that, I started a monthly gig at a venue where I invite a bunch of great musicians. Of course, I started my YouTube channel. I started teaching lessons full time. I really just went crazy into bluegrass. Basically, as soon as my first bluegrass band kind of ended, I just threw my whole life into it. And I ended up finding a lot of different ways that I could keep doing this for a living. So yeah, shout out lessonswithmarcel.com.
It's real cool, man. Yeah. Well, we had an idea for a couple of recurring segments. I guess that last part was our story. The story of us, how we came together, grew apart, and are coming together again.
For all of you real visual people out there, you can imagine like a photo album closing and the camera slowly zooming out. And that would be the end of this segment.
But yeah, let's just talk about like what we've been listening to lately, or what's inspiring us.
Yeah, totally. Honestly, that's kind of a tough question for me. My Spotify's in a real weird place, and I'll tell you why. So I'll even pull it up right now. So Spotify gives you these, I'm sure everyone who has Spotify knows, but it gives you these like daily mixes, and it's stuff that you've been, listening to recently, and it'll like kind of split it into genres. So if I've been listening to a lot of Taylor Swift and a lot of like George Strait, it'll like, create different categories for those two things. I guess that wasn't the greatest example because Taylor Swift was originally a country artist. Whatever. You guys get what I'm saying. Anyway, right now there's one that's like 90s punk. There's one that's like Southern rock. There's one that's like progressive bluegrass. There's one that's like avant-garde classical music. There's like 90s pop. I mean, they're all over the place. And normally when I wake up, I just pop one on, and then I find these like deep tracks from, whatever genres I'm interested in. And I'm just like saving them all to playlists. And I'm kind of like a music hoarder right now. And eventually I'm going to go back. That's the end goal, is that eventually I will go back and listen to it. But it hasn't happened yet. So far, I'm just hoarding all these good songs. But the big thing that I've probably been like listening to and looking for is a lot more like really good, like bluegrass, like vocal songs, like actually not fiddle tunes, like real songs. Because I want to learn more songs to sing in bands. And I'm getting tired of all the kind of standard ones that everyone's heard a million times. And there's so many good songs out there. And I just feel like I don't know like a quarter of them. And that's a real bummer. So I've been on a little bit of a song search.
That's cool, man. Like there's so much great music out there, and we're never going to get to play it all. And I don't think we're ever even going to get to hear it.
It's really easy to get buried like I am now. Don't do it. Don't let it happen to you.
As far as what I've been listening to right now, I'm ashamed to admit this, but I'm not much of a music listener. But I do get a lot of music from my wife. She listens to a lot of top 40. What's been playing on the radio. Lots of new EDM vocal cuts. And I think there's something to take out of any type of music. So whenever she shows me something she really enjoys, I try to take something out of it. That being said, I have been listening to something lately. I've revisited one of my favorite records of all time. It's called Your Drunken Soundtrack by a band called Maximum Occupancy.
What is
they're
this?
kind of
Where are you
modern,
taking me, Lyman? What are you what are you doing here? Go ahead.
Maximum Occupancy is like a modern fusion jazz trio, keyboards, bass, and drums. And they play interesting melodies, cool rhythmic stuff. Have you ever seen the meme videos, like the 1 minute jazz lessons?
No, I don't think so.
Those are hilarious. I encourage everybody to check those out. But the guy who does the 1 minute jazz lessons is the keyboard player, and I'm pretty sure the leader of
I know what you're
Maximum
talking about. I
Occupancy.
remember this. Yeah, you showed me this. This is super funny. Yeah, I remember these.
But that's one of my favorite records of all time. There's some killer lines on there, some great synth sounds. I used to listen to it every single day at work. And about a year ago, I started transcribing some of the songs. And I've started doing that again now that my guitar skills I'm a little bit more technically proficient on the guitar. So I'm trying to lift some of those synth lines into my guitar
totally.
playing. And so that record has always inspired me, but it's re-inspired me again these last couple weeks.
Yeah, it's talking about staying on a schedule too. It's kind of tough to it's kind of tough to be a really good music listener when you have a schedule and you have things coming up. If you have gigs coming up with this kind of band or gigs coming up with that kind of band, then you also have these projects where you're releasing your your EDM tracks, and then you have your for instance, the licks that we post on Instagram. You have like all of these things going on, and then you find that you're just spending all of your time like listening like it's for a project. You're like, I have this kind of gig coming up. I need to listen to a bunch of this kind of music, or like this is coming up. I need to listen to a bunch of that, or like I have licks coming up, so now I have to like listen to a bunch of stuff see if I can get inspired for licks. You feel like you don't get any chance to like find things on your own, which is really tough. So I'm glad you found something.
Yeah. I initially got into I initially wanted to get into professional music because, you just do what you love, you go play. You're not going to work all that much. And what I've realized, like this year, I am working harder than I've ever worked in my life. I've got my hands in so many different jars.
Yeah, well, we're both kind of in the same place. We're both doing like big pushes to like be doing music full time to make a career out of it, right?
At this point, I just feel like I'm throwing stuff at a wall and seeing what sticks. But I'm happy to do it. Like I'm happy I'm in the position right now where I can just focus on doing music all the time. And I don't want to squander that opportunity. I want to work as hard as possible to see if I can't, give this thing the fair shot it deserves.
It's tough. A lot of getting into music is, just like you're saying, throwing things at a wall. And I think that has to do with being a creative type. Sometimes it's hard for you to critically look at what you're doing and decide what is actually the best or the most productive. So we end up doing a lot of things and letting the audience decide, right? And then, you realize that most of your people are viewing you from here or from there. And then you realize, oh, that's where I should put my energy because that's what I'm actually good at. And I definitely found that with YouTube where, when I started the lessons with Marcel, business, and I started doing, lessons, and I'm posting Craigslist ads, and I'm getting my business license, and I'm doing, the whole thing. I decided, I should probably make a couple YouTube lessons too. And the first lesson I made just was unrecognized for like 6 months. Like no one watched it, and my production values weren't good or anything. But that video is still my most viewed video. That video, like at some point, just took off. And I realized, oh man, like the Craigslist ads aren't doing a whole lot, but YouTube is. And I realized like, oh yeah, that's where I should put my time. And I think all of my students now, almost all of my students now, found me on YouTube. So, I think it takes a while for you to like throw everything out there. And then when something finally does stick, you just have to like put 100% of your effort into that. And I feel like that's what people do. I mean, like, how many times have you heard stories where someone's in like 3 bands and then one of the bands starts doing okay and they're just like, cool, I'm out. Like, I'm with that band now. Like, that is my full-time project. That's what people do.
So do you want to talk about like what you're working on or what you're studying right now?
Yeah, totally. So I just did a big video that comes out, well, I don't know when we're releasing this podcast because Lyman's in charge, but I'm putting out a video tomorrow on YouTube that's all about how Tony Rice, of course, like the father of, I wouldn't say father, but one of the best bluegrass guitar players out there, how he plays in the key of A minor. And it was a really cool subject to kind of like delve into. And I don't think I'm particularly great at it. I probably should have said that in the video. But even when I was practicing it and working on it, just listening to the way he does it and then trying to copy it, I don't think I'm nailing it. But I think I'm doing it well enough to like give other people some tips so they can start, attempting as well. We can all attempt together. But yeah, it's interesting stuff. If I can get my guitar in tune. But yeah, Tony Rice has a really interesting style over A minor, and it's interesting. It's important for bluegrass, kind of what key you're in specifically, because we want to use a bunch of open strings. We take advantage of those situations. So that's why people always make jokes about like every bluegrass song ever is in G. Well, yeah, that's kind of important to the sound. I mean, we want to capo and like preserve the sound of G because it's so essential to it. If we try to use bar chords or something on an acoustic guitar, suddenly you get that really choked sound, and it's not the same.
It's probably rooted in a lot of tradition.
It is,
as
yeah.
well.
It's it's kind of weird in that it's a complicated genre. There's a lot that goes into the lead playing and the improvising and everything else, but it comes from a real, just like jazz music, it comes from ignorance is harsh, but almost kind of true. It comes from a point of not knowing a whole lot. It's not like, our, bluegrass and jazz both share roots in blues. It's not like the original blues musicians were music scholars, and when you look at how the genres developed out of there, it doesn't necessarily have to be from a scholarly point of view for things to get more and more complicated. But yeah, bluegrass has a lot of really funny hold-ons where it's like, oh yeah, we played the G chord this specific way and it has to happen this way, even though, there are other approaches that make sense. This is just definitely a tradition thing. Anyway, yeah, one of the really cool things that Tony does that you can try is he does these little like chord shapes, and he almost always does them in the same kind of way. But if he's playing in the key of A minor, they're your cool kind of tenacious D A minor chords. He does a lot of this kind of stuff, right? Which is all kind of pentatonic stuff. We all kind of recognize that and know what that is if you've played some guitar before. But one thing that people always want to copy is this sound, which is really cool sounding. And what it is he's, basically, and this is in the video, so excuse me if I'm repeating myself, but he's pedaling this A note. So our low A string is this pedal tone, and above it, he's basically playing some tritones. He's playing some triads. So he's playing a C triad, a D triad, and an E minor triad. So he's making like a, what is that, Dorian kind of sound by including that D major chord?
Yeah.
Everyone, check your mode knowledge really quick. Yeah. See if you can.
Oh, that is super cool. Like, I I heard the sound. I'm like, oh, is that just C and D like back and forth? But he's adding an E minor
Yeah, so the
triad
very
in there
last
as
one
well.
is like this little E minor shape. Like if it was that chord.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And then sometimes he'll do it back here too. So if you're following along at home, he'll do like your standard C shape. He'll move that up 2 frets to be a D shape. And then he'll end where the last one started. It's another really common little piece he throws in. But those sound really cool, and they give the whole solo a really cool flavor. You know, if you put that on top of all the other really standard licks. You know, is a really neat sound. And I think that's what a lot of people kind of want and are going for when they try to copy how Tony Rice plays in A minor. So that's why I did a whole video about it, and it turned into a bit of a rabbit hole for me.
That's super cool. I love that sound. Just a few triads together over a pedal sound.
So what you got going on? What are you cooking?
What I got going on right now is I've been really looking at sus 7 chords. So you could think of it as like, take like G sus 7. You could think of that as like a minor sound, a dominant sound. But I'll take this G minor 7 drop 2 voicing. You got G, D, F, and B flat. If you turn that B flat into a C, you have G sus 7. And what I've been looking at is that chord and its inversions. And I'll include tab with all these voicings as well. So I have this voicing, and then this is the next inversion. It's kind of like a F sus 2 triad with a D on top. And then the next inversion is a D minor 11, like quartal voicing, so just stacked fourths. And then
I'm just following along with the rest of the class.
And then the next voicing after that, you got this sort of thing. It's like a F6-9, I'd say. But I've always loved the sound of these 2 chords. It's essentially both G11 and D minor 11. And I've been working on like what I can do with those inversions. And if you're familiar at all with George Garzone's triadic chromatic approach, like I'm not very familiar with it, but you could take like all the intervals between a major third, and you can play any interval, and you just don't repeat yourself. So what I've been trying to do is take that sort of concept with his chromatic approach and apply it to those voicings. Making those sort of interval jumps with the top voice and not repeating myself with those inversions of the sus 7 chords I've been using. Or even keeping the top note the same. Like Marcel said earlier, it's been a huge rabbit hole for me, and like I feel like I've barely scratched the surface of these voicings and these inversions. I've also I'm just barely getting them under my fingers at this point. There's another string set that I've got to work on. I'll include tab for that as well, tab and notation. But yeah, like the sus7 sound and the minor 11 sound, it's got that super, like, at least to my ears, modern jazz sound, and I'm looking forward to like exploring and painting with these new colors.
Yeah, they're cool for sure.
Just, a little bit of nerding out for you. So yeah, that's like, 2 years of work for me, probably, just on those chords alone.
Isn't it crazy how that happens? You end up putting like, yeah. I was thinking about, I just did a video about the dominant pentatonic scale. And normally when I use the dominant pentatonic scale, I normally just kind of, I figure it out on the fly. Like, it's not hard to think about, like, when I'm passing, the 6th degree and to turn it into the flat 7. That's not a big deal, right? I can alter it as I go. And then I was, kind of like lying awake one night, and I was thinking about it. And I was like, man, what if I just kind of like mapped it out and I tried to look at what those shapes look like? And I noticed some really cool patterns that are like super obvious, but I never noticed before because I had just been, like doing it as I went, as opposed to actually like writing it down and like looking at it and like studying it a little bit. And I was like, man, I've been playing this scale for like years, and suddenly I have like a way deeper understanding of it. And it's not even like a complicated thing. It's not even a hard subject, but I just realized there was a deeper understanding to be grabbed just by spending some time on it.
All music is complicated, and it's a rabbit hole, to me, at least.
Yeah.
It's like a mountain that has no top, and I just want to keep climbing it. I just want to keep grinding and working hard to get to the top that doesn't exist.
Totally. Yeah, if you ever feel like you've plateaued, it's just because you're not looking for the way to keep climbing.
Absolutely. Well, my dude, I think we broke some new ground today with this podcast and our relationship. Even.
Yeah, this is like couples counseling. Yeah,
that should be the title.
Jazz and Grass Couples Counseling. Yeah, no, this has been awesome. I'm glad we decided to do this. I guess at the end of these things, we normally say where you can find us. Yeah.
Yeah. Do our plugs.
Cool. Well, if you want more of me, you can find me everywhere online. Everything's branded as Lessons with Marcel. The big thing is the YouTube channel, Lessons with Marcel. You can also find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And you can find my website, lessonswithmarcel.com. A bunch of free stuff on there, and there's a little bit of stuff you can buy, but don't worry about that. That's a secret. You do that if you want to do it.
I'm Lyman Lipke. You can find me at lymanlipke.com, and that pretty much leads you everywhere that you need to know about me.
And the last thing we have is what we do together. We do Jazz and Grass on Instagram and Facebook, and that's a new lick every single weekday. We swap back and forth. We post 2 licks on Wednesday, and yeah, you should check it out.
Absolutely. Well, if you stayed to the end, thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate you. And we will see you on the next one.
Yeah, see you there.